So, folks, as we continue and smile this morning, thanks for staying with us. What are the laws around firearm possession, and how does the law view self-defense when an unlicensed firearm or weapon was used? Attorney at law Matthew Hyatt joins us on Zoom to give us some clarity. Morning, Matthew. Welcome to Smile. How are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm great. Thank you for having me, Neville.
It is a pleasure. Delia is with me. Let me start.
Hi, Delia. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Let me start, Matthew, with a bit of a strange question here. I know you will have events, and on the flyer and stuff, you'll see no firearms allowed. I know that.
Yes.
If that doesn't happen, is there anywhere that you shouldn't have a firearm, even if it's a licensed one? And I say anywhere like maybe a little champs or something like that. Is there anywhere, if you don't see that sign, that you should not have a firearm?
That you should not have a firearm. Well, generally, where you have a licensed firearm holder, he's allowed to take that firearm with him on his person.
Yeah.
But as you said, Neville, when I go to events, the flyers normally say absolutely no weapons allowed.
Right.
And even during the soccer season, even my very cooler was searched in order to ascertain if there's any illegal weapons. So not only firearms, but any weapon at all. So it is very strange to me that you do have some events that patrons are actually having weapons inside of those events.
Yeah, but if the event that you went to did not say no firearms and they found you with a firearm, I mean, I'm talking about licensed
a legal firearm.
Legal firearm. Would you be in problems?
I don't think so. Okay. Not at all, because I'm a licensed firearm holder.
Okay.
So I am allowed to.
Okay.
So there is nothing necessarily in the legislation that is preventing a person from bringing their firearm to any event or in any area.
Yeah.
Once you're a licensed firearm holder, of course. But normally the events do say absolutely no weapons allowed. And so apart from, let us say, the security personnel who may be allowed to have their firearms, I'm not expecting that ordinary patrons inside of an event would have their firearms.
Yeah, sorry, Matthew, just before Delia, I asked the question because in this thing that we're talking about here, everybody say, so why would a man have a gun in a place like that with so much people and all kind of thing? That's the reason I asked that question, and thanks for the clarity. Delia.
All right.
Yes.
And I think we did have this discussion with Pierre Rogers some time ago, but just to remind us, in Jamaica, what does the law say about a person's right to defend themselves? I know this is one of the laws in the U.S. that from time to time becomes contentious because they have their own laws. What are the laws that pertain here?
Well, the law allows a person in Jamaica to defend himself. You can defend a third party. You can also defend your property. And once you raise the defense of self-defense, it is considered a complete defense, meaning that once it is raised in court successfully, then you get to go home. However, it is a law in which you have to establish, or defense rather, that the use of force in these circumstances is necessary and it is proportionate to the level of threat that exists at the time. In fact, there is the classic case called Beckford and the Queen that illustrates the test for self-defense. And it is that a person may use such reasonable force as they deem necessary where it is that they honestly believe that their life is in danger. And the honestly believing that their life is in danger is very important because that is a direction that a judge will have to say to the jury for them to explain and understand what it is and what are the circumstances under which a person might have used such force to defend him or herself. Because the law does not say that you have a duty to retreat. So if somebody should come inside of your house, for example, to rob you in the dead of night, then the law allows you to use such force as is necessary if it is that you have a firearm to protect your property. You may have your wife and kids at home, and so you are allowed to use such force. So you have no duty to retreat. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it involves the use of a firearm. It can be that a group of persons are coming up at you. It could mean that you perceive that the threat is such that some of the persons may be armed and that you may be attacked, and you honestly believe that your life is in danger, the law permits that you can use such force as is necessary in those circumstances.
I'm going to throw one at you, Matthew.
Yes.
In the case of the firearm, as we were talking about defense, Jamaica recently passed a number of laws relating to firearm possession. So if I am in possession of an illegal firearm and I use it to defend myself, what happens here? I may get off with the self-defense, but them going to hold me because I have an illegal possession of firearm?
That is true. So you may use the illegal firearm to defend yourself, and you may be found not guilty of murder or not guilty of wounding with intent.
Right.
However, there's nothing stopping the prosecution from pursuing a charge of illegal possession of firearm, because the Firearms Act does say that once you have an illegal weapon, it is considered a prohibited weapon. And of course, daily, as you know, the law now says that it is a mandatory minimum of 15 years.
Yeah. Matthew, you used reasonable force earlier.
Yes.
How you work that out? So I know the man who's called, I know him do have a gun, but him come and him thump me up and I pull my gun and shoot him. That's reasonable?
Well, every case is looked at differently. Certainly, that is not necessarily a reasonable force. A thump and then you draw for your gun.
Yeah.
For example, if the windscreen wiper flashes the water in your face because you refuse to give him $100 and you use your gun and fire at him, then you can't claim self-defense, because in those circumstances, the use of force would be totally excessive. Or if it is that somebody should be fist fighting you and thumping you and you draw for your gun, that may be viewed as excessive. So what is reasonable in every case will depend upon the circumstances of that case. And that is why it is important to look at all the factors of the case, because that may be one aspect. It might start from a thump, and then you might find that a group of persons now are coming at you to rush you or to beat you. And then you may, in those circumstances, have to use a firearm to very well defend yourself.
Yep. How different is provocation as opposed to a self-defense?
Well, in provocation, it rests upon something either said or done, or it can be a series of acts that is done that causes the person to lose what we call self-control in that moment. So with the provocation, for example, if somebody is constantly teasing you, or a man walks in on his wife committing adultery, and he pulls his firearm and he kills both the wife and the man, then he can very well say that he was provoked because of the act of walking in on his wife committing adultery. That act itself gives rise to the defense of provocation. The difference between self-defense and provocation is that once provocation is raised successfully, then it is not considered a complete defense like the self-defense. So you're not going to raise provocation and then it is successful and you go home, as we have seen in recent cases where individuals are convicted. And so you would be receiving a lesser sentence, or not necessarily being convicted for murder, but for what we call voluntary manslaughter.
Yeah, and I think the key here is successful. So folks who are watching,
Indeed.
don't think you're just going to do something and say, oh, I was provoked. You have to successfully prove provocation in the court. And you also have to prove self-defense as well, Matthew. So if I'm in a scenario and I feel that I've had to protect myself because, it's self-defense, what do I do immediately following the incident or the event? Do I call the police? Do I call my attorney? Do I go home? What do I do?
Again, every situation is different, because persons will act differently as how they perceive them. Mm-hmm. I would advise that you go straight to the police and contact your attorney if it is that you acted in self-defense. There are times when you don't have the capacity to even go to the police. Mm-hmm. But certainly get an attorney right away and advise your attorney accordingly. I noticed earlier you said that you have to prove the self-defense.
Don't you?
I just want to make it clear here that the defendant or the accused who raises the defense of self-defense does not have to prove that he acted in self-defense, because it is the prosecution that has a duty to prove its case.
Okay.
It is the prosecution that has to establish that at the time you acted, you did not act in self-defense.
Okay.
And so once the defense can show that I acted in self-defense, these were the circumstances, then in those circumstances, it is the prosecution now that has to negative that defense.
All right.
Very well explained, Matthew. Thank you so very much for speaking with us this morning. Blessings, man. Take care.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.
Attorney at law Matthew Hyatt. Up next, how do we better protect patrons at events? We have St. John Ambulance with us, and they have some answers, so we got some more on Smile.